and welcome to the post Smackdown live recap. My name is John Zindel. I'm joined by Dom Scarcella. We're going to be doing a weekly recap show of every WWE Smackdown on Friday nights. We have not watched the show in quite some time. I think Dom a little bit longer
That is
than
right.
myself.
That is right. It's been a while getting back into WWE, but this is fun. And let's get right into the action. And let's start with the big stuff. John, don't bury the lead. What happened tonight?
Don't bury the lead. Indeed, Dom. We had ourselves a pretty good main event. We had a 6-man tag match. Kevin Owens, Drew McIntyre, Johnny Gargano versus Austin Theory, Otis, and Chad Gable. All pretty good workers.
Yep.
Let's just call them mid-card guys to top guys involved with it. Some good stuff, some bad stuff, some stuff we will talk about during this show.
I do like that 6-man to end it. And we were saying this even as we were watching it, even though this is not technically the go home show for Extreme Rules, it had the feel that it was a go home show before a pay-per-view. They were alluding to Extreme Rules and to some of the stipulations in those matches, some of the confrontations that are supposed to take place on the pay-per-view. They even found a way to fit that wrinkle in at the end of this 6-man tag. When Drew McIntyre brought the strap out, he and Karrion Kross are supposed to have what it seems to be a strap match coming up in Extreme Rules. So this was, not having Karrion Kross there, just doing vignettes with them. This was still a decent way to end the match. What I also like about this main event, and you brought this up even before they announced it, is when we saw earlier in the show the run-ins that kind of set up this dynamic. You were saying, yeah, well, wouldn't it be something if they turn this into a 6-man tag for the main event of tonight's show? And they wound up doing that. So even though that kind of thing is maybe predictable, it works. And it's also a nice thing for the people who go to the show live, in the sense that there's something that happens early in the show that becomes the main event. That's really cool. That's cool when sometimes there's something self-contained within the show that gets built upon, not just something that you have to remember last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever. This was neat. So even for me, not watching WWE programming in a long time, I figured out right away why these guys in the 6-man main event had heat with each other, because we saw it an hour earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that was fairly well done. I don't know. Did you think it was well done how they set it up? Obviously it's a tried and true formula. I thought it was pretty well set up.
Yeah. So I think we probably are pretty good test subjects, as you have not watched WWE in ages, right?
Years, yeah, it's been ages.
Yes. And I pretty much stopped watching WWE when AEW came into the fold.
Okay.
So for the most part, I don't know a lot of these people. So it's nice to see, okay, why the hell are these six-man tag? Like, why is this even happening? And they give you a little intro there in the beginning, and there's like a little, there's a big scrum, and then you understand, okay, these 6 guys will wrestle each other at some point. So you have that little bit in the beginning. You're like, okay, I know a couple of these guys. I'll hang on to the end. And so from that perspective, I think it was pretty good. Specifically about the match, for sure, a plus, a good setup. There was some stuff during the actual match I liked. Smooth transition.
Okay, what stood out?
So really smooth transitions by Gargano and Theory. When they were in together, they were really sharp coming off the ropes. They didn't look lost. They looked really athletic. Like, they're smaller guys, and that's one of my points about tonight is, like, small guys are in. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a show with so many small guys on it on a WWE platform. But these
Okay.
guys were small. It looked pretty good. And, a lot of the transitions they had, you know, coming off the ropes looked really smooth. So
And by
that's
small guy, you don't mean like 240 pounds like Ric Flair or, Bret Hart used to be. You mean small, like Gargano is less than that.
Gargano and
Chad Gable looks like he's less than that. Even Adam Theory looks like he's less than that. They're not quite cruiserweights, but like Kevin Owens, he's somewhat a heavyweight. Drew McIntyre,
is
heavyweight.
giant. Yeah. Drew
Otis,
McIntyre's
heavyweight.
gigantic. And some of those guys that I saw tonight were so small, and it's just something that, you probably wouldn't see anybody that was that small. And if it was, it'd be quite the novelty, like Rey Mysterio. I think
Mhm.
about that. Like Rey Mysterio was like, wow, he's too small. He does all this crazy stuff. And then for that, it was just the norm. It was like, and then they looked good, and it looked pretty good in there with the three smaller guys. And so,
It
that's
also
just one
works
of
for a
the
tag match because Gargano, as the smaller guy who was very quick, very agile, and could sell a lot. I mean, that's classic tag team wrestling.
oh, yeah.
There's one guy who takes a lot of bumps, on the babyface side, and then it's got to be hot tag to somebody who comes in. The crowd's waiting. When's that tag going to come? And I really liked when it looked like Gargano was going to make a hot tag, and they had Adam Theory do the run around the ring, pull the guys off of the apron so that Gargano couldn't make the tag. Like little things like that. I haven't watched WWE, but I've watched wrestling for a while, and I watched it from decades ago. Like something like that is neat, and it's also the kind of thing that probably goes over really well for the live crowd
Sure.
because
I
that's something that and we had a problem on the telecast because not only the commercial breaks during the main event, but like the camera almost missed the finish
Yeah, I did
in the
notice
ring.
too.
So if you're there in the arena, you're seeing all this stuff, and it's probably really really neat. So
Yeah.
that worked. I love the hot tags first to Owens, and then finally to Drew McIntyre. And it was also another nice wrapping up of what happened earlier in the show because the match that got interrupted earlier for that big scrum to make this 6-man tag was Theory versus McIntyre. So
Mhm.
those were the final guys in the ring. So they kind of got a blow off of their earlier match that got interrupted. And so that worked. And as a self-contained show, I think it really worked. I think the main event was well set up earlier in the show. They got some big names out there, and maybe there wasn't much of a story. It's like why are these three guys? Like um, we know why Alpha Academy's together, but
Yeah.
we don't really know why Drew McIntyre, Johnny Gargano, and Kevin Owens are together. But whatever. Fate threw them together earlier in the show. The enemy of my enemy. Is my friend. That works. And it was a decent main event. For a show where they're trying to do like a double go home for pay-per-view. I
Mhm.
thought it worked, and I thought it was well set up and made an earlier segment seem more important because without this main event, I think that earlier segment just becomes a real letdown.
No, it's true. And I'm looking at my notes, and I just put like plus, and then jotted some stuff down, and minus, jotted some stuff down, and based off the main event, it's mostly pluses. I don't have a
Okay.
lot of complaints. Um, there are some things that probably could be a little improved on. And one of those is probably not controllable. And that's like when they cut to a commercial break in AEW, they'll
Mm-hmm.
at least give you, I understand you got to pay bills, you got to go to the
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah,
commercial,
yeah.
but they at least give you a little screen of what's happening so you can kind of follow along. Whereas we get a little lost when you go directly into a commercial. That could just be the way that the sponsors want the advertisements to go in.
Mm-hmm.
But it does kind of take away a little bit when during the main it just completely cuts out.
Now
The
they seem
intro,
to come back in a good spot though.
yeah, I bet you it's a lot of rest holds and a lot of like lazy boy stuff that you don't really need to see anyway when they cut to the commercial break
Yeah.
necessarily. Because Gargano was in the whole time, so I'm sure it's just like them cycling in.
As far as we knew, he was in the whole time. Yeah.
This is true. They could have been doing something crazy. They could have been beating the hell out of each other with ladders and chairs, and we missed the whole thing, you know. So,
well, I hope they did something for the live crowd in the arena, because that's something from a production standpoint that you have to be careful of. Like, on one hand, you're trying to set up the match so it works for TV, but on the other hand, a big part of your main event especially is the feel of the live crowd. And I know you and I have talked about that in other contexts, that it makes a difference, the live crowd.
100%.
And so whatever was happening in that last commercial break, it did not seem to be so much of a rest hold that it killed the crowd. So
Right.
whatever they were doing, like it was good enough for the folks in the arena, and then was good enough for us coming back on the telecast.
Yeah, I would say definitely, just to even add to your point, the crowd was into the main event. Like,
Yeah.
and there were segments earlier that I was a bit suspicious of them piping in noise. Like, there was a promo earlier with Gunther and Sheamus where there was some real suspicious chants of the crowd, and I was like, everybody's
Okay.
this is piped in, you know?
See, not much is suspicious. Like, I shouldn't say not everything is suspicious to me getting back into it. Like, everything is suspicious and nothing is suspicious at the same time.
Everything's a work. You're just constantly like, no, this isn't real.
No.
And maybe it is. I don't know. But there was some suspicious chants going on during that earlier segment. But I think that the final segment, the main event was good.
Okay. Well, let's go back to that. Unless you have more stuff about the main event, let's go back to Gunther and Sheamus, which was really just
so we're
setting up another SmackDown.
So let's just to wrap this up, we're gonna say thumbs up to the main event. I enjoyed it.
For what it was. Yeah, I mean, without knowing much of the story, it worked within the show. I mean, it was entertaining, decent finish.
And I just want to bring this up. We're up to one viewer, Dom. Welcome to Don't Bury the Lead. The
Yes,
WWE
absolutely.
Smackdown post-match show. Thank you for joining. Sure.
Yeah, so good main event there. And some other stuff we've touched on it. You were mentioning Gunther and Sheamus. Does that make you want to tune in next week for their title match?
It's interesting because I thought the segment wasn't so great.
No,
but
me either.
ultimately, I'm gonna have to say I do like both those guys. Like, they both look kind of impressive in there. So if I did see that they were going to wrestle, I'd be like, yeah, this would be a good one I know about. Even though the segment wasn't a home run, or it was just kind of like so-so. I'd be like, okay, they at least set that up. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm neutral on whether it makes me excited about their title match. But I like the fact that you put the guys on there and you find a way for them to interact. I don't know how much of it is shoot and how much of it is work. That Sheamus's two partners were stuck in Florida. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But it was a chance to get Sheamus, the babyface, out there in a disadvantage, and to give him a little bit of an advantage in the fight early. But then Gunther's too strong, and then the numbers game catches up, and Sheamus, the better, maybe sometimes the better part of valor is discretion, but no, he asks for more, and so they give him more.
Yeah.
And so if anything, that's classic formula as well. Going into a big match, if your baby face looks like he's courageous and he's valiant, but the heel still looks strong.
Yeah.
And that's what you want going into a big title match. Maybe it's a big blow-off match for a long-standing feud. You want both guys to look strong, but in different ways.
Yeah,
And so
Definitely.
them leaving Sheamus lying in the middle of the ring, the fact that they did it as a 3-on-1 and that Sheamus, wasn't quitting, he wasn't backing down in a sense. Okay, how do you look strong lying in the middle of the ring? Well, because you wouldn't back down in facing a 1-on-3.
Yeah.
You took your lumps and you're still, and now you really want to get them next week.
The gimmicks, the gimmicks were kind of lacking. Like I think they're pretty ridiculous with the German gimmick, and they're
It's
not
so obviously ethnic, and the WWE has done that for years. It's good to see that some things haven't changed, since Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik in the 1980s. They're still doing ethnic gangs.
They have the wife
Okay,
beater with the suspenders and the hat, and they're like, "We're
yeah, like
Irish," and then like the other people, they're German, so they're just Nazis. You know,
dark colored, monotone.
oh, they got the big jacket, yeah. So
Very upright in their posture, very staccato in their delivering of their promos.
mhm.
But I mean, they look like athletes, and they can clearly all go in the ring. So this segment for me is neutral. I mean, I'd want to watch their title match just because
Mhm.
they're two good competitors. I don't know that this particular segment made it more so. But it's a good way, good to get people on TV. And while you're doing so much promoting of the pay-per-view, you might as well do something to promote your season premiere of SmackDown next week.
Yeah.
So that's good TV. It may not be great pro wrestling, classic pro wrestling, but I get it. It's good episodic television. Now I
Yeah.
sound like Eric Bischoff. What the heck?
You don't want that. We
I don't
want
want too much. That's not my shtick. I mean, I'm
yes, no. Let's avoid the Bischoff. Okay, so
who I like, by the way, but that's not me.
that's
Oh
the
yes,
second.
good episodic television. I like it. Now we mentioned some good in-ring work and people who maybe or maybe not the heavyweights. To me, a great development in the last 5-10 years in that regard is how the women wrestlers they're letting them go. Like they're finding athletes, not just people who can dress up and look a certain way in an outfit.
Yeah, that's a
And
big
I did
observation.
um the Natalia Ronda Rousey.
That's probably
Um
the match of the night. I'm
it
gonna
wasn't it a good match?
yeah, that was probably the match of the night. Natalia is a steady hand, and Ronda Rousey is, you can see quite clearly, legitimately a tough person. So,
Legitimately a tough person and who has taken to pro wrestling well.
mhm.
And she gets it. She
You
seems
know,
to get it.
and I'm thinking, I noticed the crowd was pretty much reacting to them, and the crowd is, so the show is in Winnipeg, so you could see a lot of Canadian love for Natalia,
Mm-hmm.
and you could see a lot of Canadian love for Kevin Owens. So
Yeah.
it's always good to kind of shift people that are local in that area into those roles. So they did a pretty good job with that. Um, so I think, oh, it was funny. Maybe the best and worst segment tonight. So maybe the best match was Natalia versus Ronda Rousey, and then that
On the
thing
mat.
where
I like they were doing holds, they were doing mat wrestling, some high flying stuff, but it wasn't a spot fest. It was holds, it was reversals, it was a lot of the cerebral stuff that goes into legit combat sports. So and that's a good place for Ronda Rousey to be in because it would look weird if she just came out and got involved in spot fests.
yeah, and you know what? I'd have to say that's just the stuff that we probably like, though. Like I definitely am really into. I don't need to see too many high crazy spots. Like I can have some just standard mat wrestling and be like, oh, these are cool transitions and stuff like that. So
And they
um,
had a few of those. They had a few because they're both submission wrestlers.
Mhm.
And so they had a couple of those reversals, and and that's also a good buildup. It took a few times for Ronda to lock in that ankle lock, but
Yeah.
she got the win on her submission move, and Natalia still looked kind of strong in the
Yeah.
match, and not just because maybe the Winnipeg crowd was a little more behind her than they normally would be. I think she looked strong. So that was a good match. That was a good, fun match for me. Also because I know who Ronda Rousey and Natalia are.
Right. Yeah. That was helpful.
I know them from other places too. Like I know Natalia from a long time ago, and I know and it's good to see that she's still working and it's still legitimately tough in the ring. And she's the kind of person where I think we were saying this during the match watching it. She's strong enough where if someone goes over, it makes the other person look strong without burying her.
Yeah.
Like she can
Um,
have a tough match and it's believable that she could win. And when she doesn't, that puts over the other person, and yet Natalia isn't, buried.
mhm. And I'll tell you what,
Don't bury your stars and don't bury the lead.
don't
You know,
bury the lead, Dom. Don't bury it. Um, so we're at about, I think that's a lot of the notes that I had for tonight. Did you have any other specific matches or segments that kind of stuck out to you?
you mentioned probably the best thing of the night was sort of the in-ring Natalia Ronda Rousey, and then there was something that they were trying too hard. The blow off of that match when Liv Morgan came out with the bat, and they were trying to sell the confrontation that looks like they're setting up for Extreme Rules, and
Mhm.
the bat's going to be involved. So of course the bat had to be involved here, and they were just trying too hard because the bat didn't work.
Yeah.
Like the bat was almost a hindrance for a while. It looked ridiculous when they were swinging it and missing so badly. Then they're kind of fighting over it. Then at one point, Ronda picks up Liv Morgan. Liv Morgan still got the bat, not using it now that she's picked up on Ronda's shoulders. Um, and then they just had the big brawl at the end. I mean, the brawl was better than them trying to sell the fact that the bat's going to be involved in Extreme Rules. I think
Yeah.
the brawl is where you saw like that they maybe have some legitimate heat with each
Mhm.
other.
Mhm. Yeah.
I
That's
mean, the pull
that's
apart brawl, if you suspend your disbelief that there's, four grown men in security who can't possibly hold back a 120-pound woman. Um,
maybe Ronda
more things
Rousey.
change, the more they stay the same. Security is still worthless on a wrestling show, and that's part of the gimmick. It's like, oh, security's out, and they're totally incompetent. They can't
Now,
do anything. And
if
so Ronda Rousey and Liv Morgan, it might have been, the Undertaker and Mick Foley getting pulled apart or whatever. But yeah, it shows you that they have heat. Um, I but I think they tried too hard.
I think you're right, especially with the bat being kind of, it just didn't work. It just
It
looked
didn't
like,
work.
okay, we'll just
But I
use,
get it. There's heat
I'll just,
there. It was a great match, and I get that there's heat between the two people going into the pay-per-view, but it just
I'll use the F word. It looked fake with the bat. It like
it
looked
looked it
real. It just was like
what
the F word. Yeah. They're
it
like,
looked it looked scripted, perhaps, with the bat.
right. It's all scripted. Yeah, it
Yeah.
looked very script. It looks very, very, very scripted. Also, the way she was holding the bat, like you could tell she's never held a bat.
No,
Like,
yeah.
it's like
What
she's
is this I have in my hand? I mean, foreign object. What is this?
she's never like choked up and hit a softball or anything, or she's got it and like she knows you could like kill somebody with a bat, but she opts to like kind of like poke them with
The
it.
jab with the bat was the most realistic looking thing.
Yeah.
Like if someone charged you, that's what you would do with the bat. It's how you would use a billy club.
Mhm. Yeah.
You'd block and you'd jab with it. You wouldn't like expose yourself and then try to swing at somebody. That takes too long and it exposes you. You would do a block and a jab. That was the most realistic part of using the bat. And then it became wild swings and misses. And then weirdly holding on to the bat, not doing anything with it while you're getting beat up.
Yeah.
or having a tug of war over it. So I don't
I will,
know. Other things from this show that you wanted to get to? I mean, we don't want to bury the lead, but we also don't want to bury some really good segments. I thought
so
the first match of the night was a good match, and apparently they're building to Sami Zayn and some suspicion as to whether or not he's really on the side of the bloodline or not. I did like the match, even though I was just getting used to who these people are. It was a good match. The action was there. I The finish makes sense, and then the vignette backstage off of it. I mean, that was Solo and Sami Zayn winning that match. I didn't quite know who they were facing there, but I get that the real tension there is between the partners.
right.
Which is always an interesting thing to do in a tag team dynamic, is you have tension between the partners. And I thought it was a good match. I'd like to see where that goes. It looks like it's sort of a long running storyline or something that's going to have legs. So even though and that's a good way to start your show.
Yeah. Full
Start your show with something
transparency.
exciting for the live crowd, and that makes for, I'll say it again, it's good television. That you have a match like that straggles a commercial break, and then it feeds into a vignette and a continuation of a story. I think that's a good opener, even though that doesn't wind up being something for the main event. You don't want to forget about that just because it was first. I thought that was well done.
Yeah. Full transparency. Um, I missed the first match. So I
Missed
will
the first segment. Yeah.
I missed the whole thing. I had so many connection issues. We were kind of trying to watch it and share it. It was like lagging, and I missed a lot of it. So I will take your word for it, as you are the expert in recapping these matches, Tom. I'm not. So I'm just gonna go ahead, go with what you said, and yeah, I
On a
completely agree.
future show, we might get into a little more. We might have a reason to get into a little more of our backgrounds in pro wrestling and indie wrestling.
This is
Because
true.
it might have some insight to share in a show. But uh, let's see what else did we have on here. There was a squash match, Hit Row versus Los Lotharios. If the idea was for Hit Row to look good, they looked good. If the idea was for Los Lotharios to look like little more than a comedy team, they looked like little more than a comedy team. So
Mhm.
maybe they were 2 for 2 there. The vignettes with the male models that they kept doing for the TV crowd in the back. I don't know who they are. I kept referring to them as the Zoolanders.
Zoolander guys, and I think
Um,
that's what I kind
Little
of got.
comic relief. I get it. I mean, I wonder if there's some sort of a confrontation coming with, and I didn't catch his name, but I know who that wrestler is. He was Eli Drake in the NWA. So
Yeah.
somebody fill me in on what his stage name is in the WWE. But I mean, he can go. So I mean, I've seen him in the ring. I've seen him on the mic. He's fantastic.
I've never
He
seen.
can go, and if there's something building with them, that was pretty good comic relief interspersed throughout the show, and maybe it builds to something. So I mean that's a pending grade for now. It's fine if it becomes something. And other than that, the thing that they sort of referenced later in the main event, which is Drew McIntyre and Karrion Kross, we got a vignette of them, not Karrion Kross appearing anywhere in the show. I'm not sure what's up with that gimmick. I mean, he's a dancer of some sort, maybe. Is that it? I'm getting flashbacks to John Madden finding out that Herschel Walker did ballet years ago. And trying to ban him from the All Madden team because he was doing ballet. Like, no, we can't have guys doing that. But quite frankly, ballet that takes some strength and athleticism. And what it mostly takes is a lot of balance,
Mhm.
great balance. So, I mean, I get it just from knowing that dancing is tough. Not that I've danced, but I know that athletes have studied ballet for for a few decades now. It's been it's not mainstream, but it's like yoga. It does have a benefit if you know what you're doing. So
It is,
I'll go
Dom,
with that he's a badass ballet guy.
I'll tell you what, it's a confusing gimmick. We guessed ballet. I was kind of like choppy. I didn't have like great sound at the time, but I think no matter what they're trying to go for, I think from here on out, Carrying Cross is our satanic ballet guy. That's just
He might be. He's our satanic dancer.
satanic.
But he looks like in the ring that he does a lot of submission holds, and he's a big guy who just from a presence standpoint in the ring will look good in a matchup with Drew McIntyre. He's Drew McIntyre is not a wide big guy. He's a tall guy. I mean he's built. He's not skinny, but his height sometimes is overpowering in the ring. It looks like Karrion Kross and Drew McIntyre will look decent across from each other in a match. So, kudos for finding some way without Karrion Kross being involved in the live show to still promote that those guys are going to lock it up at Extreme Rules in what appears to be a strap match. So I think that's just about everything I want to see. As a reintroduction to WWE programming, this was pretty neat for me.
Yeah,
I'm glad you had this idea, and thanks for asking me to be a part of it. This was a pretty enjoyable 2-hour show.
Yeah, Dom, I'd say let's go home, right?
Yeah.
Let's go home and just give your overall. I'm just curious, overall what your thoughts are on the entire show. What you thought. I have a couple notes here, but maybe we'll kick it to you, back to me, and as we say
Sure.
in the biz, go home.
Go right. We're gonna go home. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's time for the finish. It's time for a big finish. For me, it's a varied show. There was enough. There was a good spacing of vignettes and in ring action, and even some of the stuff that I think was less effective. I at least got the fact that they're trying to sell a pay-per-view. So
Yeah.
like that at least makes logical sense to me, even if what I'm watching at the moment it's too much of a suspension of disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think this was a good show to get back into WWE's product with. I mean, there was enough variety and enough action where it was an enjoyable 2 hours, even if you didn't know who all of these superstars were.
Agreed. I have a couple things here, and you kind of already touched on it, but it didn't drag too much. Like,
No.
this was enjoyable enough. I've definitely watched pro wrestling shows where I'm like, hey, we were going to do AEW pay-per-view, and even though the matches were really good, like 4 or 5 hour pay-per-view, I'm not about that life I don't think that's going to be, that's too long.
Mm-hmm.
And this was only 2 hours, so it was digestible. It was entertaining enough throughout the whole course of it. I think a really big aspect of this specifically is it was not embarrassing to watch. And by that, I mean, sometimes they do stuff in pro wrestling, specifically WWE, specifically certain eras where they're doing stuff that's so silly that you are embarrassed for the people that you're watching, that you're even part of it. Like, I think the last time I went to a WWE event, and I've been to a bunch of really good ones, but WWE Smackdown in Philadelphia, Roman Reigns and Baron Corbin, who is a guy that they have on their roster, but they had this feud, and Roman Reigns is like the big dog. So Baron Corbin came out, he's dressed like a dog, and they did like a parody of his promo, and it went over like was horrible. Like nobody even responded when it happened, and he was like making fun of him, and he's dressed up like a dog. And then later in the show, he dumps dog food on him. I know all this sounds pretty good, but at like when it happened,
It doesn't.
I was in public, paid tickets for the show, and there was either children around me playing on their phone or like adults that were wrestling fans or the parents that were just like, what is this? Like, what is going on? So
Yeah.
it was not embarrassing. Like, I would like to go to the show. The crowd was good. So not embarrassing, didn't drag too much. Yeah.
This is less cartoonish than I remember the WWE being at certain moments.
Yeah. So that's really my 2 cents. And, in the vein of kind of going home here, thank you for whomever tuned in. We will be
Yes.
doing this weekly. Dom, this is our first show. Thank you so much for
I
joining
think
me.
it was a good one.
Yeah, this
And
is
I'm excited to do this again.
absolutely. So catch us here live on YouTube next week. Don't bury the lead. The show you need to watch today, tomorrow, and forever. Thank you, and have a nice night.